Hello, everybody, and welcome to the House Salt Book Club. We are talking about Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was our June pick. We're a little off schedule again this month, so our live show is in July, but this was our June pick. My name is Marines. My channel is My Name is Marines, and I would give this 4 out of 5 stars. It was a very good book. I only sometimes enjoyed it.
Hey guys, I'm Sam from Thoughts on Tomes, and I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. I mostly did not enjoy it, even though it's written the same way that her other books are, but mostly did not have fun.
Hi, I'm Connor from the channel Connor O'Brien, and I ended up giving this book like 4-ish stars. I actually haven't rated it yet, and I forgot to think about a star rating. So 4, 3.5, 4.
Yeah.
I'm Jordan. I'm from the channel The Jordan Journals. I have not officially rated it yet either, but I would say maybe like a 3 out of 5 stars. This is my least favorite Taylor Jenkins book that I've read, Taylor Jenkins Reid book I've read.
Interesting. Hi, everybody. I'm Paige. Minimal bookie, and as we can tell, obviously, I liked this book. I think I would give it like a 4 or 4.5. I'm struggling to figure out if I like it more than Daisy Jones or not yet. That's where I am.
Okay. I am going to ask you, once we kind of talk about this book, we'll double back around to like her other books and where we slot them in, because I think that she's got her brand, she's got a strong brand for the types of stories and characters that she writes.
Yes.
But we'll start with talking about this particular book. And I think the best place to start talking, it's about like a very dysfunctional family, a group of 4 siblings. And then, so we'll start with Nina, who is kind of the linchpin in all of this. When her mother dies and her father kind of abandons them, she takes over the family in a lot of ways. So what did you guys think of the character of Nina? Did you feel for her? We follow her for a lot of this, so were you interested in her parts of the story?
I feel like I didn't really have I feel like Nina was one of the characters that, even though we saw most of her story like throughout it, I didn't feel like she had much character growth, in the sense that like we were told from the sense that she was a kid, like since she was a kid, she was always just very helpful. That was just her nature, and like we see how that sort of impacted her throughout her life. But it was just sort of like it mirrored June's story too much for me to really like feel like I connected with it in the same way that I did with some of the other siblings in the books.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I feel like her character growth all happened within like the last 5 pages. It was like everyone was like, "You need to go." She's like, "Oh, okay, I'll leave." So like it was just very quick, and she just like, who said that her story was very similar to her mom's. It was like one for one, like she was following in her mom's footsteps. So it was just something that we had already seen happen within the same story. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why I mostly found her story, like her parts a little bit boring. Like I knew we were supposed to like feel for her, and I did. Like I'm like, wow, that sucks that like that you had to raise these kids basically and all of that. Like that definitely sucks. But I think by the time we got around to the second half of the book, which felt very different from the first half, because that's when we finally get to the party.
Yes.
It was kind of like, okay, yeah, like we saw that, like you're saying, like we kind of saw this with June already. Like I'm okay, like it's the same thing. So I definitely found myself, of all the siblings, she was probably my least favorite, even though she's sort of feels like the main character. So I feel like that was kind of tough, because I was just like, oh, I want to like you more than I do, but we've already heard this part. So
I did like the like her character growth at the end, when she finally decided to like not just like accept everything blindly, and like she took off her fancy clothes and like put on her sweatpants, like that whole thing. I really enjoyed that part of her storyline, but everything else up until that did feel very like mirrored of her mom's, and it wasn't as interesting.
So I think it's always really difficult when you have like a main character that's either apathetic, or in her case, like she was kind of a doormat, which is what she really realizes at the end, which is like a fine characterization, and you understand why she became that way. But when you have a doormat character, it's just kind of like, what am I supposed to be like investing in her, or it's really difficult to kind of like, I don't know, engage with that character, which is kind of how I felt. Like I felt frustrated a little bit reading her. I was kind of a little bored. I did like the portions of like the part of the party where she did start to stand up for herself, like with her ex-husband and with her father. But by the time we got to the very end and they're just like, go, leave, get out of here, that also rubbed me the wrong way. I understand.
Made me think of Air Bud. Get out of here.
It rubbed me the wrong way. I understand where it was coming from, but the fact that they just like pushed her away after all that, I don't know. It was a little awkward. It was a bit of an awkward ending.
There's even one line where they're like, and so this is where they like made space for her to leave and for this new sister to come in.
Rude.
Yes. Yes. And the thing that like, okay, it's the 80s. It's not like that long ago where she's like, well, maybe I'll just sort of like almost fake my own death and all this stuff. And I was like no one's gonna know. I don't know. It felt like it wasn't long enough in the past that like that would have just been like easy to do. Like I know then the house burned down, so it's a little bit easier maybe. But like this whole like I'm just gonna go and no one's gonna follow me. I'm like, if you're that famous, people are gonna, and they're like, well, she'll just take a different car. It'll be fine. I'm like, what about the people on the airplane with her? Like I don't like. I felt like, right, I'm like, I don't feel like this is gonna work out the way that we're saying it's going to, and that part was kind of like, what?
The 80s were like that's like when supermodels were super famous. Like,
right?
You wouldn't have been able to just like get on an airplane. Nobody noticed. Who
well,
you
I was
were.
thinking also that she would die because at some point they were like, "This is the last time they all surfed together," and I was like, "Yeah, who's gonna die at this party?"
In the fire.
I honestly thought like the whole thing about like the party and these hours and whatever would be like somebody died or some other thing. So when it just became like a messy party and then she like planes away into the sunset, which the drama around her leaving the way that she did, I didn't really think it needed. I get it, she's famous and she like kind of wanted to step away from that life, but did it really have to be the drama of like leaving in the middle of the night and like it seemed a little too much for me, like that ending.
And honestly, that adds even more to the fact that people would want to find her. Like, of course, Starlet goes missing. That becomes, there'll be podcasts about her later on. Like, come on, like 2 white true crime women are gonna find you later. Like, I don't know. And she couldn't have predicted that, but like it just was one of those like, I don't think this is gonna go as smoothly as you think it's gonna go, honey.
You could have just taken a vacation, girlfriend. Like, I don't know why it has to be this big a deal.
But it was weird too because like she's in the story, she's really not. I mean, she's recognized, but it's like at places where she's expected to be. To like sell your restaurant and just like don't go back.
Yep.
Shocking.
I mean, it took her how long? It took the other sister how many grocery stores to find her? Like, out in public, she wasn't like as recognizable as I guess you would expect.
Yeah, it's really funny because this is like a story that is full of like high drama in a lot of ways, but I'm so happy that this was all of our sticking points at the end where we're like, no way. It would never. But yeah. So I guess moving on from her to the other siblings, we have the 2 brothers, Jay and Hud. They're kind of a package deal in my head, especially because their storylines very much intertwine. Like their high drama comes in a pair. So what did you think about them and that storyline?
I was really curious. I really liked how Hud's character was like done because he could have been this like terrible thing that happened to them and pushed the mom over the edge because he's like this other child that came into the picture, but he wasn't. He was just a part of the gang, which I really liked. Someone commented that they thought the drama with the brother's heart would be bigger. What's his name? Jay. And I thought, so like when we found out about the heart, I was like, oh, well, is he going to have a heart attack at this party?
Yes.
Yep.
Nothing. And I'm so disappointed.
I thought he was going to have it when he found the photos of his ex blowing Hud. I was like, this is the point where his heart's just going to give out. He's done. Like he was saying his heart feels weird. And I'm like, oh no. But of course that didn't happen. But yeah, I agree. Hud was my fave of all the siblings. I love him desperately. I don't know why. I can't tell you why. I just know that Hud is like my favorite character.
I mean, he is a little shady because he was cheating.
He is,
yes. Okay, yes, okay, yes.
It wasn't
He's like, but it's for love.
The dishonesty sort of thing. And
Listen.
like I kept forgetting, but like every time I would think about it, I would remember, oh wait, it isn't just that he's dating his brother's ex-girlfriend, is that he started sleeping with her while she
they
was
were
dating. Yeah.
Yes.
And I
kept
kept
forgetting
getting
that too.
angrier.
Yeah. Yeah. The
But
book kind of excuses that away though by like Jay kind of being a fuckboy. So like, although it's one of those like gray area things where it's like, yes, technically on paper this is like a very bad thing, but also like it's kind of implied that like Jay didn't even like her.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
you know, so it's kind of one of those
he
like
said that he didn't really like her that much.
Right,
either.
until he so that's why when Jay finds out and then he's like, I'm mad at you. It's like for what?
For what?
It kind of felt like they stole that scene from The Family Stone.
Oh,
and he's like, you don't even love her, man.
Yeah,
you don't even love her.
Yeah, he had been fantasizing about this other like Lara girl for like pages now, and I'm like, I'm supposed to buy that you're upset about Ashley sleeping with your brother? Like, no.
Exactly, and that's the thing that's like, yeah, technically, like, yes, that was a bad thing. Shouldn't have done that. Blah blah blah. But when you have this like, when we see what's going on with Jay, and it's just kind of like, you didn't even, you're just using her as like a trophy.
Yeah.
Like,
it would have been different if Jay had reacted like, I don't care about Ashley. I care that you lied to me. Like then I would have been like, yeah, true. But he did react in sort of like a fuckboy way of like, no man, I don't want her, but you can't have her either.
Yeah.
To answer the question in the comments, it's because it's only been 7 weeks since she's been pregnant. So it was long after she broke up with Jay.
They had been together for months at that point.
Yeah.
Ashley had been sneaking behind Jay's back for a long enough time that it was clear that Hud was the father.
Yeah, because Jay and her had been broken up for a while, but they had started the relationship before they broke up.
Yeah. And Jay was kind of like he was a little bit of a bland character. Not bland, but he was like the least compelling one, especially because like in addition to like the fuckboy part of it and then that like weird sidebar, there were so many weird sidebars here. So he had that whole weird sidebar with that one girl, but also the way that he treated like Kit and was a little like dismissive of her and her talent or whatever. And then at the end he was like, oh, I guess she is good. I was like, man, get out of here.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's why I like forgave Hud more because like just the way Jay was acting the entire time, it just felt like he was so entitled and he like believed he needed to be the best because he was the first son of Mick and all that stuff. And I was like, I don't like you, so I don't care what Hud did, honestly.
I just like what was implied that Jay was gonna do after he stops I almost said snowboarding. Surfing.
Manage.
Is he gonna be like a manager?
I kind of got that he was gonna manage Kit's career.
Yeah. Which also was like, okay.
Like he's not even like a really famous, I mean, he's like a little bit famous. He's just starting. How's he gonna, I don't know. Whatever, man.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were Kit, I'd be pissed and not want him a part of my journey.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Kit because I loved her. I loved Kit a lot. How did you guys feel about that character?
Yeah, Kit and Hud were definitely my two favorites. Just because they definitely could have been like more bitter than they were, and they kind of weren't. And I was like, oh, it's kind of endearing. And like her whole journey, you know, finding out that she's gay, like just kind of everything that she went through, and the fact that like she was the one that always gave shit to Mick. So I was always like, yes. Like I feel like she was the reader in that, being like, shut the fuck up, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like she was always the one giving him sass. And I just appreciated her because the other kids seemed to kind of just like roll over a bit when it came to him. And she was always like, no, this is fucked up and I don't like you.
Yeah.
I really
liked kind of how she was with their mother too.
Yeah, she was the first one to be like, you're an alcoholic. And everybody was like, oh. And she's like, what? She
blatantly is. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Are you going to tell me I'm wrong?
I'm wrong?
I really liked her like process with figuring out her relationship with Nina. Because like Nina's basically her mom. But like she also is a little bit bitter towards Nina because she's been like holding her as the baby of the family and not letting her like do things for herself. So I really liked seeing that relationship kind of break and reform into what it's going to go forward with. But yeah, she was the best.
I also really liked that being a middle child and both having a little sister and being a little sister, Kit had great little sibling energy. Like there was something about just like the brashness and the boldness, but also the uncertainty and like all of that I just felt was like, yeah, that is truly a little sister, like well written and well captured, especially considering that all of these things, that the way that she approaches Mick and the way that she says what's on her mind is very much a product of she was around but still so young when all of the worst stuff was happening. So she didn't have the same memories or kind of like, you know, internalize the trauma the same way the other kids did. So getting to see her kind of sass around was great. And I really liked that, you know, a lot of it was her little piece of this is kind of a coming of age story, but also people seeing Kit for the first time and being like, oh, like she's pretty, she's awesome, she's talented, like go Kit. And every time I was like, yeah, go Kit.
I love that she was like the most bitter in terms of like she tracked down their dad and was sending him invitations to a party that doesn't have invitations just to be like, you suck.
And she kept sending them because she said like every time he didn't show up, she felt less bad about never going to his funeral. Oh my God. I was like, that's fair. All right, so that covers the siblings, unless we have any other feelings about the siblings.
Well, there's another sibling, technically.
Oh, the one at the end, yes.
I mean, again, I have no feelings really about her at all because she was just like a random bit that gets thrown in at the end, really. But she's technically one of the siblings, and like we mentioned her in the Nina part.
Yeah.
I feel like the author tried to like kind of parallel Mick's journey in this new sibling that was joining the group, because both of his parents died, they like in a car accident the same way that this girl's parents died.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't care about this.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection.
It's like tried to June too, though, because there was like one line specifically where like when June found HUD, she was like, I'm gonna just love this kid because that's what he needs, and they say like we're gonna do that as well, and that's how she lives on, and that got me. I didn't care about the character, but I was like, that use of that line was very smart. I see what you're doing, and now I'm like over here feeling emotions.
I think the thing that was a little bit like almost annoying for the adding that in for me was like, we already know Mick's a piece of shit, so adding in this like there's probably other kids and we're gonna have to like eventually find these other kids or whatever. It's gonna like, oh my God, like more of just Mick being like super annoying. So just her, like, she's just an entirely forgettable character because just she's more like a representation of these other things and these parallels more than an actual character.
Yeah.
But I liked that it was kind of paralleling Mick as well, like Nina was for June. We kind of had like both of the parents as the, you know, in the siblings.
Yeah, because I mean, a big thematic thing about this is like, what do we inherit from our parents? And so like Nina's big realization at the end is like, okay, she inherited all this stuff, but she can like choose what to keep and what to give away. Like she's just absorbing all of this or carrying all of this without realizing. So in like paralleling June with Nina and then Mick with the new sibling and, you know, all of those little pieces, like it made sense to me from a thematic point of view, but also like, this is why I had such a mixed reaction, is because I can see it and say, wow, that was good. But in my feelings, I was like, am I enjoying this? I want to punch everyone.
Exactly.
Mostly Mick. I mostly wanted to just punch Mick. So let's talk about Mick and June as the parents. Their early chapters were some of the ones that like at first I was kind of like not uninvested, but just kind of like whatever reading. But when I got to the chapters of their early relationship, I was like so in love. Even though I knew this is not going to end well, the beginning scenes of them together were pretty swoony and I loved them. So how did you guys feel about their story overall?
I think for me, what made their like eventual demise more like, not believable, but like hard to swallow was like how her dad immediately loved him and he like won over her dad. And so like her dad was like, I'm going to be hard to impress. And then he wasn't. And like, it was her mom that she should have been listening to. It was like,
yes.
oh, no.
I think that was just like Mick being Mick though, because like he's a charmer. He says like he has to tell, like he has to turn it off and make sure people don't like gravitate toward him or whatever. And like Mari, I was just like really romantic. Like I was into the romance because it was so romanticized. It was meant to be like this like fantasy image of them falling in love, and I was like, I'm here for it. I know it's gonna be bad, but like let me be happy when they're happy.
and like the fact that it was like back in I think 60s or 70s or whatever. So even just the descriptions of like the two-piece she was wearing at the time and the way she speaks to him in like a almost very like formal way because, you know, the manners and the, I don't know, all of that just made it seem like I could see the like rom-com, like the you know, in my head or whatnot. So I was like, oh damn, I'm getting, I am also falling for this June. Don't worry.
See, I had the opposite reaction where I was just like, ugh, like the entire time because I was like, I could not suspend my disbelief. I knew he was love bombing, and I was like, this is a narcissist. This is an awful person, and he's love bombing her, and he's trapping her, and what a piece of shit. So like the whole time, I was just like, ew, with him entirely. So like all of the flashback scenes with them, and then the continued like she takes them back, like. And maybe also I admit I have a job in which I talk to like battered and abused women like pretty frequently. So I'm so sick of hearing about narcissistic spouses that I like want to scream. So reading it, I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not fun at all. Like even the drama and the angst of it is just like, no, because this is like, this really happens to like millions of people basically. Like, so this is awful and I hate this. And so yeah, it wasn't fun for me, which is why I gave it 2 stars. And I do want to comment, even though Kayla's not here, that Kayla and I were both screaming about how much we hated all of the Mick stuff, like the entire time. The Mick and June relationship was awful for both of us, and we found solace with each other in that.
I do think that though, like Mick was. Oh, 1 second. I do think that Mick was like a well-written character, though. Like
it was purposeful,
he did like all the awful things perfectly.
Sure,
like
but
and all the way through too, because he's like someone was commenting about how he like tries to take credit for how similar he thinks Kit is to him.
Yeah,
it's like you had nothing to do with how Kit is. Like,
you could tell he was a narcissist for sure. Like he's not supposed to like him as a character.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing is that I say this is a really good book I didn't always enjoy reading because those chapters were really tough to get through, especially the June ones, but they were purposefully so. It wasn't romanticized in a way where we were supposed to feel anything towards Mick other than he is a narcissist. This is a really terrible situation. And the fact that this is where these kids came through. So while you have these like wild things happening in the background, like people swinging from chandeliers, literally, like the whole thing is though, like this is like, you know, the trauma that that bred these children basically. So that's, I also had that experience, Sam, where I was reading it and it reminded me so freaking much of Billy, was his name, from Daisy Jones and the Six. Like, oh my God. And I was just like, why does Taylor Jenkins Reid write these men? And this part of the reason I don't like Daisy Jones and the Six is because Billy gets a happy ending in some ways in that one, and he gets a little bit more redemption. Whereas this one, the only way that I probably would have given it 5 stars if Mick had like, I don't know,
died in the fire. Died in the fire that he built.
Yes.
That you bring up the Billy situation, because if we're talking, I know we're going to get to the part where we're sort of like ranking these books, but I found Mick, although his behavior is like classic narcissist, I almost felt, not that he was like, I don't necessarily think he's written badly, but he did feel more one-dimensional to me than Billy did. I do think Billy was a more complex character than Mick was. So again, we have this like awful stuff happening, and then I felt like Mick was one-dimensional. Like all he was a narcissist, which is like, that's kind of how they are. But
was it because we got Billy's perspective though? We got more of Billy's perspective in Daisy Jones.
True.
Sure.
But like, it's still, I just didn't, like, Mick as a character, and also the fact that like Mick is the through line to all the books. I'm like, fuck.
Of all the people,
is he really?
Yeah, he's in every single book.
I haven't read any.
So
he's mentioned in Daisy Jones. He's at a party that she's at.
He's mentioned in Daisy Jones, and then when Mick says that he got married to like the most famous woman in the world and doesn't say the name, that's Evelyn Hugo.
Yeah.
So he's one of the husbands in Evelyn Hugo. So like it's
my
just
mind is blown.
bleh. Like of all the people, you choose this guy to be the through line, and like just he's bland. I think honestly. So
I will
like,
tell you,
But
I
that
will
shit happens
literally
in real life.
I'll
Like,
read
bland
literally
people
almost
are so successful for no reason.
I mean, true.
anything
Whiteman.
Taylor Jenkins reads. Like if she writes anything, I'll probably read it. A
Absolutely.
Mick book? Absolutely not.
No,
I
Yeah.
can't not a Mick book.
No. I
that'd
mean,
just be
this
the end
was
of Mick.
yeah, this was essentially a Mick book. I mean,
No,
like,
he
because it
had
was
such a
like
smaller part, I think, in this. It was, I
Mhm.
think it was more about like his kids and whatnot. And I don't know. We'll talk about kind of how this was all formatted. But I wanted to say one thing of that, you know, as much as I can say that it felt like he was written awful purposefully, there is one thing that I don't know if Taylor Jenkins Reid like believes this, but it is something that comes up a lot in her characters. But this kind of idea or feeling like cheaters gonna cheat, they can't help themselves.
Yeah.
And like
Yes.
so that like that
Agreed.
repeated idea of like I tried, but this is just who I am. I just wanted to
Yeah.
like gouge my eyes out every time.
But I do feel like that's a little bit of how like some people are. They're like, if you admit your faults, then you're not in charge of them anymore. So
Yeah.
it's like he's like
Yeah.
I tried, but I just am a
It's
bad
just-
dad.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well that doesn't excuse you for being a bad dad, but to them they think that they're excused because
right.
they've
It's like
said
I
it.
can't help it. It's
But
just
it's not
how
only
I am.
Mick.
Right.
It's like Mick
It's
and Nina's
Billy.
husband
Oh,
in
I
this
don't know
one.
any
It's
of the other
Billy. It's like
Yeah.
it happens a lot. These characters that are just like the cheaters gonna cheat characters, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, when I was reading this one, I was like, well, the brand for TJR now is like she writes women that are so good that like the men never deserve them. Like that is her brand in every book without fail. And it's so annoying because I'm like, you could do so much better. And like I hate reading about like these women falling for these men and then they're like treated horribly in each
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of her thing. Which again, it is one of those things. Like it's like Maddie is saying, is it because Taylor Jenkins Reid like sort of believes this, or is she just showing that there are plenty of people in the world who flat out do believe this? Like,
Right.
which one is it? But the fact that it does pop up in like basically every book, it's like, like they're just not fun to read about.
But she also just has like a style of having like these very dramatic books.
Totally,
Mhm.
and
So, like,
always
so if
in-
he's a really good guy and she's a really good girl, then it's just a romance.
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and they're
And-
also
Let's
against
try
like the
that speed,
backdrop of
Taylor.
Hollywood
Let's
too.
try that speed.
And she always, and it's always in obviously like fame and fortune circles,
Right.
you know, like the
Mhm.
music, the
Mhm.
movies,
Yeah.
Where it's
you know,
like
the
all those
supermodels.
characteristics get larger than in
Amplified.
like
You're gonna have narcissists. Like that's what happens. Cult of personality type people. So like it makes sense that like the themes are gonna be there because of the like setting that she chooses.
Speaking to this, like, was it on purpose or not? Somebody else brought up in the comments that they thought Mick was going to die when it had that line about him
Yes,
not using his turn signal. And I
Yes.
did too. So now there's like these, we've already mentioned a few times where we're like, well, I thought that person was going to die at that point. And so is this on purpose? Did she
You
keep,
think
like,
there'll be a future
misleading
book?
us?
You think there'll be a future book where he does die? Like if
He's
she
gonna
goes
show
like
up in
another
the background
decade?
of the next book.
Yeah.
100%.
She's gonna kill off
we're gonna
all
get a
her
Mick
characters
reveal.
in one book.
We're gonna have a '90s book where we get to see the tragic downfall of Mick and he's gonna die or
Please.
something.
Well,
Please.
if anything, okay. So what I predict if we do have like a '90s or early 2000s book is that he will end up in an article that the character is reading where it shows that Mick died, not that we're actually going to follow
Probably.
Mick. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
Put it on paper.
Yeah, I would agree. Or like on the news or TV
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if like the like misleading about like all of these moments where we're like, oh, we expected something more to happen was like drama just to add drama, but I think the whole like the way that this whole thing is built is that you're expecting something explosive to happen, especially
Yes.
with that
Mhm.
line of like they'll never surf again, and she keeps throwing out these misdirections that are like the heart, the turn signal, like all of these things. I'm like, somebody's gonna die, the fire at the end, and then nobody
Yeah.
dies.
It,
And I'm
it
like,
just is so disappointing because I felt like something bad was like, and then the cops they're awful. So I was like, is this best friend gonna die? Like,
Yeah.
someone is supposed to die at this party, and no
Yeah.
one did.
Yeah.
It makes me
Well,
upset.
also, and I think that's also why I got a little annoyed. I wasn't necessarily waiting for someone to die. I was basically like, okay, we're coming down to the fire. Like, I wasn't necessarily looking for some of these points about people dying, but the fact that at the beginning they're like, okay, the person who started the fire is the person who always like starts a fire and then walks away, and I was like, oh, so it's Mick that's gonna start the fire. And so like the whole time I was sitting there like, okay, so Mick's gonna start the fire, and then he does, and I'm like, okay, like I knew this from page 1 though. Like, so why did it take that long to get to the point where Mick starts the fire? Like there was parts like that just kind of like bothered me.
It is such a perfect way though for him to start the fire. Like on accident, like on accident, unaware of it being his fault. Just like
he steals someone's
nonchalantly.
car.
No, someone steals his car.
Stole his car.
Yeah, and he hitchhikes.
Thinking about how he's gonna make somebody's night by hitchhiking, and then just like throws a cigarette and like walks away.
Yeah,
to not realize the destruction that you've left behind as you just like move out. Yeah, I mean it fits him. It feels right.
I thought
somebody said it at the beginning, and I'm like, well, now we know it's going to be Mick. So
I thought somebody was going to set the fire on purpose just because of the marketing. I've been thinking about the marketing because I've like read the copy 50 million times for like the synopses, like for work, and I'm like, this is not what I thought it was going to be because like there's so much about the fire that I'm like, the fire is like the least interesting thing about this entire book.
I was always a little bit confused because like at the beginning of the book, she's been left by her tennis husband or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like at the beginning, she's like, I just loved my childhood home. I'm like, it's still in the family, and there's enough rooms where you could have just moved back in with your family that you love so much instead of in this giant house that you obviously hate. I don't know why she didn't just spend a weekend.
None of her decisions really made sense at all.
Like, she was just like, I'll sit in this mansion and suffer. It's like,
all right, so the storytelling of this is really interesting because we have that feeling of like counting down. This covers like a very short amount of time, like leading up to the big party and then the fallout afterwards. And then it's told from all of these different perspectives. And we start doing the perspective jump a little bit at the beginning, but about 50 or 60% of the way through the book, we actually get to the party. And then we start getting all of these random perspectives. We just start jumping to like the waiter, everybody and their mom literally at this party gets a perspective. So how did you guys feel about the overall structure of the book? And was there like a portion of the book you enjoyed more than the other? How did you like the random perspectives? All of that.
I was a huge fan of the first part of the book, obviously, because I like interpersonal, messy drama. So I cared about like the families themselves and how they were like hurting each other and like like the way like it was about inheritance, like you were saying, like the parents were this way because their parents were this way, and like does that necessarily have to be the case and all of that stuff I enjoyed. I feel like the party, like that sort of is when it went downhill for me personally, because like all of the different perspectives, I was like, it's fun to see all of this, but I want to know what's happening with like Jay beating up Hud in the front yard. I want to know like what Nina's doing in the pantry. I don't care about these people doing like 50 million lines of coke, to be honest.
Yeah.
My favorite part was definitely like the siblings relationship. I love reading about siblings relationships. It's my favorite thing in books. So like them having the four of them and then after the mom dying and how they all had to like come together and how Nina had to sacrifice so many things for her family, and because like that was expected of her from society and herself and her like parents or whatever. So that was what I was most interested in. And then when we got to the party and it was jumping to this guy that was like, I want to be best friends with everyone, so I brought all this cocaine and I'm going to pay all these weight. I was like, whatever, I don't care about you. I just wanted to like see the sibling fights and makeups.
Yeah.
I think I enjoyed the first portion of the book better, but I read the second half faster. I got through the party stuff quicker, but I really liked the portion of it that was leading up to like their mom's death, is because it was obvious that like they didn't have either parent anymore, and I liked the like mystery of like what had happened leading up to them losing their parents. So like, was that like the first third or so of the book?
Yeah.
So this is one of the things, the way that the book was structured was one of the parts that I had the most problems with, because for me, this felt like two different books mashed together. And from when I first read the synopsis, and I don't know if this was part of the marketing at all, but I really expected a book that was entirely like the second half. And that's what I was kind of going into. Like I like, generational family stories and stuff like that. But when I went into it, I wasn't expecting that. I wanted rich people being fucking crazy and watching all of their shit. So when we have like, the first half that's mostly focused on these kids, and then the second half, we have all these other perspectives and you don't really get as much of the family that you've been following for the first half. I was like, okay, this book could have either been an entire book of all the kid stuff, so most of that is more fleshed out and we have like all of that, or we have a whole book of the party. And that would have been better for me if we had one or the other. And I think, honestly, that for me, we could have had a full book of the party and still had a lot of the kid stuff mixed in without full flashbacks. And it still would have been good and would have been better fleshed out. And then all of these other POVs, while we wouldn't have necessarily had like fully fleshed out POVs, I would have cared slightly more about these random party characters that we got because we would have had more time with them. Like the stuff with the friend that got arrested and all this stuff, like I felt like we were supposed to care a little bit more about that, but it's like, I don't know you. So what do I care? So I kind of felt like the marketing, in my opinion, and how I read the synopsis, was expecting the second part of the book to be the full thing. And so that's what kind of annoyed me too. As I was like, I was waiting for shenanigans, rich people shenanigans. And also, this is maybe like sort of a shitty thing. The fact that we see their life before they were all rich and wealthy and famous or whatever. Again, if I expected that, that's fine. But I went into this book expecting rich people problems and just first world shit. And you're like, you guys are all billionaire assholes. And like, I want to just watch you guys set everything on fire. And the fact that we got like this more complex thing, I was like, I didn't want the complex thing for this. That's not what I expected. I wanted them just to be like rich people problems. Yeah. And so that was a little bit for me.
I like both. I like both sides of it. I liked both the like quieter interpersonal stuff and this like wild rich people party stuff. I think they could have been integrated more or better, like more seamlessly, because it really did feel like a first part of the book and a second part of the book that didn't really mesh. And I think a big way to change that is to bring more of the end of the book forward and to start at the party or start somewhere where you're like, oh, this is crazy. And then get some flashbacks that really start to inform who the characters are. So you get the full sense of the messiness. But to do flashbacks and then party, even though they kept telling us the party was so important, like or like a tradition, I kept thinking, why are we even at this party right now? Like, like it didn't feel like a part of the story that was happening. So I liked both parts. It reminded me some of Nicola Yoon's book, The Sun is Also a Star, where you had these random like points of view. And I loved it because the point is not to know the characters who are in those random points of view. It gave the sense, like I felt like I was in a crowded party. Like it gave that sense as you were reading of like all these people surrounding you. And it also fed in like thematically to some of the stuff that it kind of was getting at, how random people come into your life. Have you ever seen the memes that like are like, oh, I met this guy in college and all of a sudden like I wake up next to him every day, like and he's a stranger, like that kind of meme of like how you fall in love with like a stranger and all of a sudden they become. That's the vibe that this gave. Like you cross paths with a stranger and they're having their whole complex life, but you only know a piece of it or whatnot. So I like that vibe. I think it was one too many point of views, and I don't think that the two parts were integrated well.
Exactly.
It's sort of like that. Everybody's their own main character. So like, of course, we're seeing it from their perspective because they go to this party thinking they're the most important person there. Yes. So like that part was like, I understood, but like you said, like there's just too many of them. I feel like if we kept like a couple of the characters and saw them through, like guy who brought 2 bricks of Coke probably would have been very interesting to watch at that party in like multiple like instances. Yeah. And I feel like just like TJR, I'm so used to her like being rooted, like the glamour is just the background, that like that's why I didn't come in anticipating that it was going to be about the glamour, because like all her like her 2 previous books were about like the humans and like how fame impacts them, but like the fame was very different here. It wasn't as like stereotypical as we were expecting.
See, and that's go ahead. That's where I thought like with all of the perspectives, like again, I didn't necessarily think it was just going to be, when I say rich people problems, like I thought that it was going to be a party with all those perspectives, kind of like you were saying, where we were going to get all of that. So we were going to get the people part of it at the party. So, and like you were saying with the Nicola Yoon book, Mari, like that, I actually really like the Nicola Yoon book and how those characters, like those POVs we got felt very real in that book. And, I was like, okay, yeah, these people feel like, they're living their own lives. In this book, it felt like all these POVs that we got at the party, I was like, these are just like props. Like they're just props for the chaos. And I wanted kind of like, like I sort of wanted a couple chapters with the Coke guy, like to be kind of seen, like if you're going to drop these people in, you obviously thought about them, like give me more. So I honestly feel like for me, this book would have been like really great 4 or 5 stars if it was entirely the party. We got some of these moments. Like we didn't, as much as I know you guys really liked like the Mick and June backstory, like I didn't actually need the full backstory of their romance.
No.
Like, you could have just told me he was a narcissistic parent, she turned into an alcoholic, like little snippets we could have gotten of that, but we didn't actually need their like POVs. Like I don't think. Like I don't think we would have missed much. And I think we would have gotten more of the sibling story in current times with a little bit of flashback. And kind of fleshing all that stuff out about the end that we all were like, wow, the end was kind of a mess. Like I think if we would have had the time in present day more instead of flashing back so much, it would have been stronger.
I think especially too though, because the party wasn't a like Hollywood exclusive party. Like it had people from all over the place.
Whoever knew,
if you knew the party was happening, which is so weird because she's this freaking supermodel, everyone's gonna know about this party. So I don't know why it was like this like
you
on
had
the
to
down
know
low.
where it was.
She's a freaking supermodel. People are gonna know where she lives.
You can't Google it. No, like it was a different time. It's not like they can Google her house. Like it was like the 80s. I feel like they probably have more privacy.
But like like famous people talk to each other, so they're like, "Oh, she lives here."
Yeah, true.
There should have been way more famous people also attending if this was like such a big deal. But anyway, because there were so many people, like at like the restaurant people and like a person from I don't know down the street, like we could have gotten their backstory through a lot of those people that have been in the town for a long time.
Yeah.
It was cool, to see what they think of the family.
Right, like their POVs could have like thinking about like, oh, remember when this happened to the mom? She died tragic. Like, wow, that's so sad. Like, I just feel like that was there when she dropped out of
school or something like that. Like,
I don't know. I do feel like that kind of like telling their story through both them and other people's perspectives of them would have been really cool.
Yeah, I still think that for me, their story was like a necessary part of this. I think without the fullness of their parents' backstory, as uncomfortable as it was, it did so much character work for these characters that I think would have felt a lot more flat without knowing where they came from, especially like Jay and even is her name Nina? I always forget the main girl, the older sister.
Yeah, Nina.
She would have been complete, like had you not known the fullness of her parents' story, that doormat feeling would have been even more. I just think for me, it was the integration. Like I liked both parts. I just needed like something a little smoother. It needed to feel like one book instead of.
Well, you could have also gotten it through like Nina. Am I like behind? Am I lagging?
No,
no.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
But like I feel like we could have gotten a lot of these like really important moments of Nina's life through like her friend who she went to her house because she was like at a party or something, and then her friend was like where she stayed, and her friend could have told the part where like they stopped hanging out because she found mom.
Yeah, I definitely think that we could have gotten the same elements in a different way, like through again this more like disjointed thing, like Connor's saying. Like there were so many other people that were involved that I feel like we still could have gotten some of that stuff. Like I just think that I wanted more of the kids, and we actually got a lot of like Mick and June in the beginning. At least.
But I think that's the point though, because like in this book, like her whole theme is like parents and how when they fuck up the kids, and like that was like that was the whole theme of the entire book. Like every single like thinking of like HUD having a kid and like being like, I'm gonna choose to love this kid. Like it was all about like parents and kids this time. It wasn't really about anything else. So we needed the Mick and June, unfortunately.
Could you imagine getting that portion from HUD's mom?
Oh my god, no, I wanted
to know so much more.
That would have been so much. Like
I want that so bad. Write a bonus chapter. Oh my god.
Also, my sense of justice was like screaming at that point. Like I love June for just accepting and being like, this is my kid now. But also in the moment I was like, yell at her, run after that car, do something. She was just like, baby.
I mean, but honestly, that would be so jarring. Like someone just comes up and is like, here.
This is yours now.
So nonchalant, like, oh yeah, sorry, like I fucked your husband. Here's his baby.
Yes.
Like the audacity of that woman. Like how did she have the like strength to just like do like kind
well,
of?
She said it was like, cowardice and audacity. Like the fact that she was cowardice to give him up, but had the audacity to do it like that.
Yeah, like just wow. At least just like
it was
drop
on
them
social
off
media
and
though,
leave
because imagine like you find out that like this woman left a kid and she took care of her, and then like all of Mick's kids are suddenly being dropped off at the doorstep.
Honestly, oh my god!
I kept also thinking, having to remind myself that this was the '80s, and probably things are different, but I kept thinking like somebody should take this to the press. Like if I were June, I'd be like boop boop boop, like hello tabloids, can we talk about my poop stain of an actual husband and what just happened to me?
Well, that was back. When were they born? Like the late 50s, early 60s, something like that. So I feel like she wouldn't have had as much agency.
No.
To be able to do that.
It's a family matter.
I kept having like my 2021 reactions and having to remind myself, like, okay, different time. Can
you imagine like the messy TikToks that would have been a thing if this happened right now? on Messy Talk.
Stacey would have her on TikTok and she'd be like, I think Mick Rivers my dad? Question.
And people would be like doing like side-by-side comparisons. Amazing. All right, so if there's anything else about this story that we didn't get to talk about. All right, so I kind of want to talk about other TJR works and kind of where you rank this in what you've read. Tell us what you've read, what you thought, and where you rank this one.
I can go first. So I've read Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones, and this. And that's the order that I would rank them in. Evelyn Hugo is my favorite, absolutely iconic. Daisy Jones I really like, and I listened to the audio of Daisy Jones, and it's a full cast, and I really like that. But it's not as good for me as Evelyn was, and then this is at the bottom.
This is the only one I've read, so.
Oh, spicy! Now you need to go back to read the other two.
I know. Like, are you interested in reading more of her work?
I'd probably borrow them from the library.
Do the audio.
Yes, the audio for Daisy Jones for sure.
Yes.
I'll check them out. I'll report back.
Same as Sam. I've read Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones, and this, which I would also think I'd rank it in that order as well. Although Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo are super, super close. I listened to both of those on audiobook, and I did not listen to this one on audiobook. So I wonder if that would have made it a better experience for me. Because I really enjoyed the other two audiobooks.
Yeah, I've read those three too, and I don't know like how. I think Evelyn is always going to be the top for me. I just love that, like that wrecked me emotionally in a way that I will never recover from. But for Daisy Jones and Malibu, I think I like them the same, but I like them for different reasons. I like Malibu for like the themes and like the way she wrote it. I thought that was really like interesting, and I really enjoyed that. And thought it was like I could see like the way she was actually like trying to do like a little bit more than she did with Daisy Jones. But I like Daisy Jones because I like Almost Famous, and that gives me Almost Famous, A Star Is Born vibes, and like I was here for it. So I feel I like that one more in terms of enjoyment, but I like the writing more in Malibu Rising.
Yeah. So for me, same three books. Evelyn Hugo's number one by far. I really like Daisy Jones while I was reading it. I still recommend the audiobook to like anybody and everybody, even though in retrospect, I think that this is a better book than Daisy Jones and the Six. So this is my number 2. Daisy Jones is number 3. Daisy Jones is by far the better character than anybody in this, but the end of Daisy Jones and the Six is absolute garbage, and it ruins the entire story. Spoiler alert!
So bad for Camelot.
Go read it anyways.
Come back.
Let me know. Yeah,
go read it anyways. But also, the end of Daisy Jones is garbage, and it ruined the book. So this is number 2.
When I
Daisy
say
Jones
like
is number 3.
When I say she writes women that are so much better than the men, it's Daisy Jones. It's like it's not even the character you think we're talking about. It's somebody completely separate. I'm like so salty that that's the way she was dealt in that book. And
yeah. So see, and that's why, like I mentioned earlier, why Daisy Jones beats this for me by a lot. Because one, I felt like this was a mess, like just with how it wasn't integrated well, like we've been saying. So where the other two books, I felt like flowed so well and flowed so seamlessly, even when we had like kind of flashback moments and stuff. Like Evelyn Hugo has flashbacks. But for me, these characters are going to be so forgettable. Like I know you guys are saying like you love the themes, and maybe this is more of a thematic book, and I just wasn't in the mood for the themes at the time. But like I remember the characters of Daisy Jones like vividly. Where these characters, I'm like, what's their name? Like who were they? Because it was more about the themes than it was about the actual characters, in my opinion. So that's why, and I prefer more of the character-driven stories. So the Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones are much more character-driven, and the characters felt more complex than they did in this one. So that's why I preferred those more than this one. Yeah. But yeah, the end of Daisy Jones,
garbage. Poo-poo.
Yeah.
Like,
And not only just like was that I'm sorry, every time I think about it, it wasn't just it was like the end was bad. It ruined the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Like when you think
I don't
about what it
think it
revealed,
ruined.
it
Yeah,
absolutely does. When you think about who she is and what it meant for her to be conducting those interviews, and then what people told her as the one conducting those interviews, it shoots the whole story. I can't. We got to move on. Poor Connor needs to come back.
Come on back.
I think I blocked the ending of that book out of my brain because I don't remember.
Okay. I feel like this is the first book where
remember.
like there isn't a twist. The twist is that there's no twist in the book because the first two had like a big twist. You were like, oh my god, and this one doesn't.
Yeah.
That's why I think that all of those little times that I was thinking like, is somebody gonna die? Like number one, it's because I was trained, and number two, I kind of feel like she was like punking us, like, no.
I'm wondering if there's something like to be coming later that's gonna like those other things lead up to.
Maybe Mick was supposed to be the twist, but that was not the same level as the other ones.
No,
it was not. Yeah,
I was surprised that he was alive though, because I did assume that he had passed away, like the mom did. So when they were like, "Yeah, Mick is alive, getting ready for the party," I was like, "Oh, I assumed he was dead."
He was only 50 at that point though, because they'd had kids really, really young. So
I had assumed he was also dead.
He is still prime to make further appearances.
He can make,
he can make
a ton more babies.
10 more babies.
30 more years of babies in him. Like, I mean, maybe we'll follow more of his kids in the future. I hope to God not. I don't want him anymore. I'm tired.
Apparently she's already almost done the next book, she said.
Do we know what the next book is, like, when it's set at all?
90s.
90s?
It's her plan is to do that. So I don't know if she's going to do anything past the 90s though.
Are we?
Because that was the last one.
I wonder what we're going to do, because she's done movies, music.
I think when she did Daisy Jones,
music.
she briefly mentioned something about like R&B, like that stuff in the 90s. Which I was she wanted somebody else to write that. She wanted somebody else who was like actually like a person to write that.
Like an Olivia, like sort of like vibes.
Yeah, she mentioned that in like one of the events she did here. It was like she would love to see that if somebody else could like write in it, but
she's gonna run out of decades, and what she's gonna do?
2020 is like TikTokers.
Go back and add.
I need to know what happens then. Oh my god.
If anybody has any questions for us about this book and our experience, now is the time to ask it, because I think we are winding down. Anything else you can think of here? Any random observations or lines or characters we didn't get
Can
to
you
talk
remind me again how it connects to the other two books? I need to.
I'm gonna go grab
Celia
Stevie.
St. James just mentioned.
Yeah,
that one I did catch.
Yeah, Celia's mentioned one of the woman that Mick marries at some point, where he just mentions like, I was married briefly to like the most famous woman in the world. He married Evelyn Hugo.
Okay.
Yes. He was like a 2-second husband that got annulled overnight. I forget what the whole situation was there, why she chose to do that, but that was one of the husbands. And then he's mentioned at a party. Right?
Yeah, he was mentioned
at
a party in Daisy Jones, and I think Greg is from Daisy Jones. He was a producer, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
I don't know. His name was really familiar to me, and I was trying to be like, I think it's Daisy Jones, but I can't remember how.
Jones. Yeah. Because it was music.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a dog.
I see a puppy paw.
It's Dobby.
You're Stevie.
To steal her.
So as we admire the puppy, we've got
and Sam's
now
cat.
Kitty.
And
oh my god, it's pet o'clock.
Wow.
We've got a question that says, "Is there a scene that made you feel different about the book?"
About
this book, I would assume. Yeah. Like, is there a scene that like either really soured your experience, or like when you realized you were enjoying it, or anything like that? Or were like for you, Sam specifically, were you just like immediately like nah, and that was like pervasive?
Kind of. Yeah, like the first 10%, I text Kayla because we were reading at the same time, and I was like, I don't think I'm liking this. And she's like, I don't think I'm liking it either. It was just like again, because I was expecting more dynamic characters, I was like just not pulled in the same way that I was like immediately. Like even though like Daisy Jones in a lot of ways was like super annoying, I was like, this is interesting. Like these characters are interesting to me. Some of the like side characters in Daisy Jones in particular, like the side couple in Daisy Jones, I was like obsessed with. So and again, Evelyn Hugo, like I like loved the characters, and so for this I just was like, I'm not connecting to anyone, and like it's getting just kind of like a little bit disjointed, and yeah, so it just kind of like continued, and then we got to the second half, I was like, this is a mess. So it just like kind of wasn't fun the whole way. I still like recognize that like she's a good writer, and I'm going to continue to like read books from her. This one just wasn't for me, and that's fine.
I think it was the June and Hud scene when Hud gets dropped off. That was the scene where I'm like, oh no, I'm emotionally invested in this now. Especially Hud. I am emotionally invested in Hud and his story.
Yeah.
Yes. Same. Yeah. That was kind of I had like some of the Mick and June ones. I was like, oh my God. Like I understood why June was falling the way that she was, and I was invested, but it wasn't until the June and Hud scene that I was like, oh, okay. I'm having feelings.
For me, it might have been the scene where June realizes what's happening to her daughter and how her daughter is just literally living her own life, like June's life over again. And she's like, go take your siblings surfing or whatever, go to the beach. I was like, oh no. This is going to go badly.
And then them all like learning how to surf on that day, and then like talking like later that night, the way that they were all still thinking about it and processing or whatever. I thought that was a really sweet like scene overall as well.
The surfing stuff was really cute. The fact that was like more of a through line. Again, I even sort of wish we would have seen more of that. Like just kind of like all the surfing stuff, like the surfer sort of like
we didn't really get surfer culture.
Surfer culture is like kind of fun. Like that would have been fun to see more of, like their experience in that.
Well, to that kind of end, we have another question that says, Ricky asks, who from Malibu Rising would you like to see pop up in future TJR books? Obviously not
the best friend.
Kit
Taryn or whatever her name was.
Yeah, the girl that got arrested.
I hope she's in the next book. I love her.
No, the one that got arrested.
The one who was like, give me the good wine, like, I loved her.
She had I can't remember what her name was.
In the audio, she has an accent that's like very
Tareen.
Is it
Tareen?
Yeah. That's how I remember. I don't remember her name.
Like French, like from this other place, like had this amalgamation of an accent.
Yeah. It would be Kit for me. Because I think like the potential of her story of like getting into surfing, you know, discovering her sexuality, all of that, like in it, I would love to read more about Kit.
And she would get to do the surfing that Nina never got to do, because Nina was just like a prop on a surfboard.
Yeah,
exactly. She would get to like actually.
No, I'm sad again. Oh no.
I almost. Go ahead. You go.
Okay. I think the model has a pretty good chance of popping up, because if we're going to the 90s, supermodels in the 90s were like the thing.
And she said she wanted to like start a fashion line. She wanted to do like all this other stuff that could like lead into
fashion. Is she going to do 90s fashion as the background? Okay.
I would be here for that.
She's also
going to marry Greg.
Yeah, she also at the end of the book realizes that she doesn't have much time left as a model.
Yeah.
Because she's going to have to change gears. Yeah.
I can see that. But we said it here first, people. We solved it.
Either we will be just amazingly right or embarrassingly wrong. Either way, that's fun for you guys.
That's fine.
Someone asked what Stevie is. Stevie is a Catahoula leopard dog mix.
Catahoula leopard dog.
I'm gonna let her lay down because she's tired.
Baby.
Like, chill out.
All right. Any other questions? If we had last minute questions can come in, but we've got our announcement for the next month. So technically, like I said, this was June's book and we did the live show in July, but we're going to take, I guess, not really a little bit of a break, but we won't have another live show in July. Our next live show will be at the end of August, and it will actually be for 2 books. And so we're going to be reading the duology, Hank Green's duology. It's called The Carl's Duology. The first book is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, and the second book is A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. So we'll be reading both of these books and discussing them in August, at the end of August, but look at our Twitter and stuff where we'll probably maybe announce it.
Yeah. So it's still technically a book a month, but because a couple of us have read it, not me, but the ones that have read it said that it's really, the duology is like one giant story. So that's why we're choosing to not take a break and you know, only discuss the one. It's better to discuss it as a giant thing.
Absolutely. And there are some things that I feel like feelings you have about the first book that are so directly addressed in the second book, like that you need to read them together, or else it would just be like a whole bunch of like, wait, you gotta wait. So we want to do both books together, discuss the whole duology, and we'll be back in August for that live show. And I think that is it. If nobody else has any other questions, we did it. This is the first time in a couple that we actually did a whole hour.
Yay!
Amazing.
So
All right, guys.
Awesome.
We'll see you guys soon. Bye.